Golf has just crossed a line that many believed it never would. For more than a century, the sport has been defined by tradition, patience, and resistance to radical change. But in a single night, that sense of permanence was shaken. What unfolded wasn't just surprising, it challenged the idea of what elite golf is allowed to look like in the modern era. And once that line is crossed, there's no going back, because some moments don't ask for permission. At the center of it was Rory McIlroy, one of the most influential figures in the modern game, and Boston Common Golf, a team that entered this experiment carrying expectations but very little belief. On paper, this was supposed to be controlled, contained, even predictable. Instead, it became something far more disruptive, a statement delivered by the very people tasked with proving this new format could work. And statements like this tend to echo. What made the result feel impossible wasn't just the scoreline. Boston. Common had been written off early, dismissed as a concept still finding its footing while others appeared better suited to thrive. Doubts lingered about chemistry, adaptability, and whether this environment could truly produce elite-level performance. Then, under pressure designed to expose weakness, they didn't just survive, they delivered, and doubt rarely survives results. That's why this moment matters far beyond a single night. This wasn't simply a win, it was a proof of concept playing out in real time. A question now hangs over the entire sport. Did this night permanently change how elite golf can be played, watched, and ultimately sold to the world? Because once possibility becomes reality, the sport is forced to respond. To understand why this moment mattered, you have to understand what TGL actually is, and what it deliberately removes from the traditional game. This isn't outdoor golf stretched across 4 calm days, it's golf compressed, accelerated, and exposed. Shots are played in a simulator calibrated to punish tiny errors. Transitions are instant, and hesitation is no longer an option. The margin for safety is stripped away by design. And when safety disappears, truth shows up fast. The format forces decisions at a speed elite golfers rarely face. A visible shot clock eliminates prolonged routines. A live audience amplifies every mistake. Team strategy replaces individual isolation, meaning one poor shot doesn't just hurt you, it affects everyone. Under these conditions, pressure doesn't build slowly, it arrives immediately and stays there. This is golf with nowhere to hide, where precision and decisiveness are tested simultaneously, and very few players are built for that. That's exactly why Rory McIlroy stood out. He didn't fight the constraints or try to slow the game down, he leaned into them. His natural tempo, trust in instinct, and willingness to commit quickly became advantages rather than risks. Where others looked rushed, McIlroy looked freed. The tighter the window became, the more comfortable he appeared. And comfort under pressure is never accidental. This is where Boston Common Golf changes the conversation. Their performance wasn't chaotic or gimmicky. It was controlled, repeatable, and sharp under stress. That's the proof point. This format doesn't dilute elite golf. It concentrates it. And once that's been demonstrated publicly, the argument against it becomes much harder to defend, because evidence always speaks louder than tradition. The reaction across the golf world was immediate and telling. This wasn't treated as a novelty result or a curiosity to be dismissed the next morning. Players were talking privately, executives were watching closely, traditionalists, even the most skeptical ones, were forced to acknowledge that something uncomfortable had just happened. The conversation shifted from "will this work?" to "what happens if it does?" And that's a very different question, because attention follows disruption. For those guarding the established order, particularly within organizations like the PGA Tour, this moment landed as a warning. Elite golf, delivered in a faster, more intense, more transparent format, didn't feel watered down. It felt sharper. And once fans experience that contrast, it becomes impossible to pretend they won't notice the difference. Elsewhere, you can't ask audiences to unsee efficiency once they've seen it feels this compelling, because comparison is the most dangerous force in sport. That's why this night feels like a point of no return. Expectations don't reset, they escalate. Broadcast pacing that once felt deliberate can suddenly feel slow. Tournament schedules built around long stretches of inactivity risk appearing outdated. When pressure, clarity, and consequence are condensed so effectively, patience becomes harder to justify, and patience is no longer guaranteed. The biggest shift may come with younger audiences. This format speaks their language. Immediacy, visibility, shared stakes. If this is what elite golf can look like, the question becomes unavoidable. Why should the future wait 4 days for what can be delivered in hours? And when that question spreads, the sport has to answer. This moment doesn't carry the same weight without Rory McIlroy at its center. Not because of star power alone, but because of what he represents inside the sport. McIlroy isn't chasing relevance or a late career reinvention. He's still competing at the highest level in traditional golf. That's precisely why his choices matter. When someone with nothing to prove embraces change, it reframes the entire conversation. Because credibility can't be manufactured, his involvement gives this format legitimacy in a way no promotional campaign ever could. This isn't a retired legend lending his name or a sponsor-driven experiment. It's an active major champion putting his reputation on the line in a new competitive environment. That signals confidence, not just in the concept, but in its seriousness. If this were a sideshow, McIlroy wouldn't be here, and everyone in the sport understands that distinction, because risk reveals belief. The contrast with more cautious players is impossible to ignore. Many have chosen to wait, observe, and protect the familiar rhythms that have defined their careers. McIlroy has done the opposite. He's leaned into experimentation, accepted exposure, and embraced a format that removes comfort. That willingness separates leaders from participants. He's not following where golf is going. He's helping decide the direction, and direction is power. This win amplifies that influence. It strengthens his voice in conversations that extend far beyond shot making. How golf evolves, how it's presented, how it competes for attention. McIlroy is now shaping those outcomes, not as a spokesperson, but as proof. And proof changes who gets listened to. Professional golf now finds itself at a fork in the road, and there's no neutral ground between the two paths. One direction leads toward adaptation, integrating faster formats, embracing new environments, and accepting that elite competition can exist outside its traditional frame. The other clings to familiarity, risking a future where the sport feels increasingly slow, distant, and out of step with how audiences consume competition. History is clear on this point. Sports that hesitate eventually get overtaken, and hesitation has a cost. This is why Boston Common Golf matters far more than the standings suggest. Their win wasn't chaos or novelty winning out. It was structure, pressure management, and execution succeeding under conditions designed to expose weakness. That makes this a proof of concept, not an exception. Once elite performance has been demonstrated this clearly in a new format, the argument against its relevance collapses, because performance ends debate. The implications reach beyond one league or one season. Broadcasters are watching, sponsors are recalculating. Tour leadership is forced to ask uncomfortable questions about pace, presentation, and accessibility. When fans respond to immediacy and intensity, it reshapes the commercial logic of the sport. What once felt optional starts to feel inevitable. And inevitability changes. Behavior. So this wasn't just a shocking win, it was the moment golf confronted a truth it had managed to delay. The future doesn't need permission to arrive. The only choice left is how the sport responds. Will it evolve on its own terms, or be forced to react later? And when the next generation looks at elite golf, what version will they recognize as the game?